Welcome everybody to this episode of our series dedicated to the Knights of the Temple. An episode that inevitably leads to the catastrophe that brought the history of the order to an end. The great trial unleashed by the King of France, Philip the Fair. In an operation without precedent, Philip manages to have every Templar in their commanderies across the entire kingdom, the Kingdom of France, arrested on the very same day. The plan is coordinated with absolute precision. Sealed orders opened only at dawn, so that no one suspects what is about to strike them. We will uncover the truth behind the tragic end of the Templars, and we will examine just how remarkable the organizational and logistical machinery of the operation truly was. The Templars noticed nothing until it was too late. Through a careful investigation based on the most important written testimonies of the period, chronicles, trial records, papal documents, and royal decrees, we will retrace step by step the schemes by which the King of France set out to annihilate the order. By following the evidence left behind by the protagonists themselves, we will uncover how this vast operation was conceived, coordinated, and executed. From the mass arrests of the Templars in France to the torture that were inflicted on them and the final execution of the last Grand Master, we will retrace one of the most ruthless political machinations in history. Accused of the gravest crimes, what were these crimes? Sodomy, the worship of a mysterious idol, described in the sources as a being having a head, sometimes bearded with multiple faces, and the denial of Christ. The Templars were condemned as enemy of the faith and driven inexorably to the stake. This is the true history of the end of a brotherhood that had become a symbol of immense wealth and international power. The last of its members perished in the flames before the people of Paris. What follows is a trial that drags on for years and remains controversial even today. The Templars, under interrogation, confess to everything: heresy, idolatrous rites, denial of Christ, spitting on the cross, and sodomy. To this day, scholars still debate whether these confessions reveal a genuine degeneration of the order or whether they were simply the product of a political trial and accusations extorted through torture. The destruction of the Templars astonished contemporaries. How was it possible to suppress such a wealthy, powerful international organization? Why did no one defend them from a king in dire financial straits who sought to control their wealth? In reality, the trial of the Templars is one of the darkest and most complicated events of the earliest 14th century. And it cannot be explained simply as the greed of a king determined to seize the riches of a too prosperous order. In fact, most of the Templar properties were ultimately assigned by papal decree not to the French crown, but to the Hospitallers. There is something deeper at work. The context is crucial. Christian Europe was emerging from centuries in which the popes had firmly declared their supremacy. For more than 200 years, they had claimed to be the political leaders of Christendom, superior to emperors and kings alike. But now a shift was taking place. The most powerful monarchs of Europe are no longer willing to accept this balance of power. And the most powerful of all is Philip the Fair. A dark, fascinating figure, a king who greatly expands royal authority through political trials and accusations of heresy against his enemies. This is an age where intellectuals and statesmen increasingly debate the dangers of heresy, of corruption among the clergy. And Philip is a master at exploiting judicial machinery to break his adversary. One of those adversaries was Pope Boniface VIII, whom Philip's agents even arrested in his palace at Anagni and allegedly struck, the famous slap. Boniface died shortly afterwards, and here we see Philip the Fair locked in a bitter struggle with the papacy. And he and the intellectuals in his service boldly declare that in France the true authority is the king, The clergy, they insist, must obey him, not the Pope in Rome. Long before the clergy existed, they claimed the King of France was master of his realm. This is the atmosphere in which the successor of Boniface VIII, Pope Clement V, must somehow try to restore peace with the French monarchy. Remember that France is not only the most powerful kingdom in Europe, it is also one of the Church's longest-standing allies. The Pope cannot simply ignore it. It is no coincidence that Clement V eventually moves the papal court to France, to Avignon, ushering the Avignon papacy. And for a time, we'll see some other times, there will be actually two popes in the Christian world. He goes there because re-establishing ties with the King of France is essential, and that at this moment, Philip the Fair holds the advantage and intends to make it clear. The trial of the Templars arises above all from this context. Philip the Fair wants to demonstrate to Clement V who truly commands, who's the boss. He wants to show that the King of France can directly attack a major religious order, one protected and directed by the Pope, and destroy it, forcing the pontiff, the papacy, to follow in his wake. And that is exactly what happens. The entire trial is orchestrated by the French monarchy, while Clement, caught completely off guard, does what he can to save the Templars, but ultimately fails. In essence, the trial becomes the moment that reveals that centuries before the rise of absolute monarchy, the papacy's ability to impose its will on kings has come to an end. From here on, the Church will lose ground, while the state will gain even more. The accusations toward the Templars are devastating, and they spread across Europe in an instant. It seems unthinkable that the Templars could have committed such immoral acts. Everyone is shocked. The order suddenly appears like a relic of the past, unable to escape trial and, in many cases, death. To understand their fall, we must go back to Acre in the Middle East, a city on the eastern Mediterranean coast, north of Jerusalem. In April 1291, the Mamluk Sultan Al-Ashraf Khalil besieges the city with an army perhaps 40,000 to 60,000 strong. Acre holds tens of thousands of inhabitants, a sizable garrison of several thousand soldiers, and a few hundred Templars. These knights belong to the order that, as we know, was founded at the beginning of the 12th century to defend the Christians in the Holy Land. But nearly 2 centuries after their creation, despite 8 crusades, the Christian territories have nearly vanished. Surrounded by Mongols and Mamluks forces, they live under constant threat. Acre is one of the last great Christian strongholds in the East, and it has been the Templar headquarters for a century. On May 18, 1291, the Sultan's soldiers stormed the city. Guillaume de Beaujeu, the Grand Master of the Templars, is mortally wounded. 3 days later, Acre falls. The Christian enclave is lost. Once the Crusader territories reached the height around 1140, and since then, both lands and numbers have shrunk. The fall of Acre is a disaster. Many die, others flee by ship, and the remaining Christian outposts collapse. With the city's fall, the Crusader states come to an end. The last settlements along the coast are evacuated almost immediately. By the late summer of 1291, all Christian territories in the Holy Land are back under Muslim control. The Templars withdraw to the island of Cyprus, which becomes their new base. Yet, even driven from Acre, the Templars do not abandon the struggle. They immediately begin planning a return to the Holy Land. Before leaving Acre, they had already prepared. The order's treasures and archives were secured, and on Cyprus, a new Grand Master was ready to assume command. In the spring of 1292, Jacques de Molay takes office. Jacques de Molay, likely in his mid-40s to early 50s, had spent decades fighting in the East. He is the 23rd Grand Master of the Order, and above all, he is a warrior. He is not diplomatic, not a political strategist. He is a man of arms who believes the temple has a single mission: to wage war in defense of Jerusalem and the Christian faith. After the disaster of Acre, de Molay faces an immense challenge. The order was founded to defend the Holy Land, and now the land has been lost. Many in Europe believe the Templars no longer have a purpose. But de Molay is determined. As early as 1293, he travels across Europe to persuade the Pope and the kings that reconquest is still possible. For 15 years, he works tirelessly to maintain an armed presence on Cyprus, always ready to return to the fight. Then, in 1306, comes a turning point. The new Pope, Clement V, entrusts de Molay with preparing a detailed report on the conditions necessary to launch a new crusade. It is easy to imagine his reaction. After 15 years advocating this cause, the Pope finally asks for his opinion. His hopes may at last be realized. This report is preserved today in the National Archives of France. The Grand Master's words are clear. Jacques de Molay believes a return to the Holy Land is feasible. He says, "We must organize a great crusade to wipe out the enemies of the Christian faith. If we could only have 12,000 to 15,000 knights and 5,000 foot soldiers, with God's help, we could reconquer the Holy Land. I also advise arming 10 ships as soon as possible. I myself will take care of the money for the expenses." With his long experience, he knows small expeditions cannot change the balance of power. Only a true army and a fleet can. He sends his report to the Pope, leaves Cyprus at the end of 1306, and arrives in France in early 1307. Jacques de Molay reaches France ready to do everything possible to promote the new crusade. He does not yet know that he will never see the Holy Land ever again. He is the 23rd Grand Master of the Order of the Temple, and he will also be the last. In conclusion, as Jacques de Molay stepped onto French soil in early 1307, the last Grand Master of the Templars, he still carried the fire of an old dream. After years of begging kings and hopes for help, he finally had what he wanted: a chance to plan a last great crusade. Thousands of knights, a strong fleet. He believed he could bring Jerusalem back to Christian hands, and for the first time since the fall of Acre, hope felt real, at least to him. But France had changed. King Philip the Fair, handsome on the outside but hard as stone inside, was deep in debt and hungry for power. He looked at the Templars' land, their money, their freedom from taxes, and saw something it could take. Dark rumors about the order's secret ways were already floating around, waiting for the right moment to strike. De Molay didn't see the danger. He rode through the kingdom, visiting his brothers, talking about the coming war in the east. He had no idea that secret orders from the king were already on the way, and on their way to every Templar house. One morning in October, soldiers will kick down doors and drag the knights away in chains. These were men who had faced death on battlefields, who had held the walls of Acre until the very end. Now they will face something worse, a king who wanted them gone. Not because they had lost the Holy Land, but because they no longer fit in a world that was leaving the Crusades behind. Jacques de Molay would never see the East again. The proud order, born almost 200 years earlier to protect pilgrims, was about to die. And not in battle, but in prison cells and courtrooms. The time of the Templars was ending, quietly with the turn of a key in a heavy iron lock. Well, this marks the end of this episode. In our next one, that will be the last of this series. We will go through each details regarding the Templars' trials and their inevitable end. Well, thank you very much for following up this far, and I will see you next time. Bye.